Watson Interiors stood in the Maplewood district, a suburb of Seattle, Washington. It was a well-established furniture and interior shop that had been in the family for 3 generations, known locally for its discerning eye and quality. Melissa Watson, who worked there, was making final adjustments to a new display as morning light streamed into the store. "That looks perfect," Melissa said, stepping back to admire her work. The space, which blended mid-century modern with Nordic design, reflected her refined sensibility. Melissa had grown up surrounded by furniture and had cultivated her design talent from a young age. Her aesthetic sense was highly regarded by customers, and recently she had become known as the new face of Watson Interiors. "Melissa, what do you think about that arrangement?" came a voice from the back of the store. It was Melissa's father, Frank Watson. Frank had meticulously combed his graying hair and was wearing a neatly pressed button-down shirt as he did every day. He was a man who valued the old ways and traditions he had inherited from his father, the store's founder, above all else. "It's fine, Papa. This arrangement will showcase the furniture beautifully when the evening light comes in," Melissa answered confidently, but Frank frowned. "But we've been placing large furniture against that wall for 70 years. Customers expect it," he said. With no sons or daughters besides Melissa, Frank had placed the burden of preserving the Watson name and store on her shoulders. She inwardly sighed at her father's stubbornness, but smiled without changing her expression. "I'll think about it," she replied. Just then, the bell at the store entrance rang, and Melissa's mother Doris entered carrying paper bags in both hands. Unlike Frank, Doris was a woman with a gentle demeanor and kind smile, someone who had always prioritized family peace above all else. "Everyone, it's lunchtime. I bought sandwiches from that special bakery," she announced. "Thank you," Melissa said, approaching her mother and kissing her on the cheek. As the 3 of them sat around the small table in the office having lunch, the store phone rang. Doris got up and answered it. Melissa didn't miss how her expression gradually clouded over. "It's Ashley," Doris said quietly, holding the receiver to her chest. "Seems like there's another problem." Melissa inwardly sighed. Her sister Ashley had been the center of the family since birth. Though blessed with an adorable appearance and captivating sociability, she was always stirring up some drama. Recently, she had divorced after barely 2 years of marriage and moved to an apartment near the family home with her 4-year-old son Noah. Doris hung up the phone and returned to the table with a tired expression. "There seems to be a problem at Noah's daycare. Someone needs to pick him up, but I have a volunteer commitment today." "I'll go," Melissa offered immediately. That was always her way, naturally assuming the role of the good daughter and reliable sister. Doris's face showed relief. "You're always so dependable." Frank nodded but said nothing. In his mind, family members helping each other was simply expected. Within that expectation, Melissa always carried the heaviest burden. Melissa mentally reorganized her afternoon work schedule as she finished her sandwich. And this with her wedding just 2 days away. Her relationship with her fiancé, Jason Clark, had begun 3 years ago when he visited the store as a customer. Jason, building his career as an architect, was drawn to Melissa's aesthetic sense and intelligence, while she opened her heart to his kindness and passion. He was the one who gave her the courage to live her own life. Before leaving the store, Melissa took a photo of herself with Jason from her desk drawer and smiled unconsciously. In 2 days, she would change from a Watson to a Clark. It was the beginning of a new life. However, Melissa always found herself torn between her responsibilities as the eldest daughter of the Watson family and her own happiness. Making sacrifices for the family, that was something she took for granted. Lately, though, she had been wondering if this was really the right way. Taking the car keys in hand, Melissa took a deep breath. For now, she would go pick up Noah. The day before the wedding, Melissa's apartment was filled with wedding dresses, accessories, and bridesmaids' dresses, wrapped in an atmosphere of happy tension. Jason was staying at a friend's house for just one night, looking forward to seeing her tomorrow. As Melissa was checking the decorations she would use tomorrow, she received a message from Jason on her smartphone. "Waiting for you tomorrow. I love you." Melissa was about to reply with a smile when her phone rang. The screen showed Mom. Since her mother had called several times for final wedding confirmations, she answered without thinking much of it. Come to the General Hospital right away. Ashley's been in an accident. Doris's voice was trembling. In the background, Melissa could hear her father Frank giving instructions. What happened? Is she okay? Melissa asked, quickly throwing on a cardigan. I don't know the details, but it seems serious. Come quickly. Melissa sped to the hospital. Her heart was racing. Though her relationship with her sister was complicated, her chest tightened at the thought of something happening to Ashley. And concerns about tomorrow's wedding also crossed her mind. After parking in the hospital lot, Melissa rushed to the emergency entrance and found her parents in the lobby. Doris's eyes were red, and Frank stood with a grim expression. How is she? How's Ashley? Melissa asked. Frank placed both hands on his daughter's shoulders and said in a grave voice, Melissa, listen. Ashley's condition isn't good. According to the doctor. He paused and continued, we have to cancel the wedding. For a moment, Melissa couldn't understand her father's words. Cancel? But we could postpone it, not cancel it completely. Not postpone, cancel, Frank's voice was resolute. Ashley is in intensive care. She needs her family. Doris added tearfully, Noah is frightened and won't stop crying. He needs his mother. And right now, Ashley needs you. Melissa's mind was in confusion. But the wedding is tomorrow. The guests, the catering, the flowers, all the preparations. Your sister is in critical condition, and all you can think about is your wedding? Frank's voice grew stern. Melissa shook her head slightly. That's not what I meant. I need to talk to Jason. What is there to discuss? Frank raised his voice. Family comes first. If you choose your marriage over your family now, you're no longer a Watson daughter. Several people in the lobby turned to look. Doris grabbed her husband's arm, but Frank's anger didn't subside. I'll go see Ashley, Melissa said in a trembling voice. When she asked at the nurse's station, she was told which room Ashley was in. It wasn't the intensive care unit, but a general ward. Feeling a strange sense of incongruity, Melissa headed to the indicated room. The door was slightly open. Just as she was about to knock, she heard laughter from inside. Melissa froze in her tracks. Entering the room, she found Ashley lying in bed, holding a mobile phone in one hand, looking at something with enjoyment. She had only minor scrapes on her face and, although she had N4, she was far from critical. Ashley? Her sister looked up with a surprised expression and quickly placed her phone on the bedside table. Melissa. You came. What happened? Mom and Dad said it was serious. Ashley sighed theatrically. I just fell down some stairs. The doctor said they need to keep me under observation for tonight, just to be safe. Melissa was confused. But Mom and Dad? Those two always exaggerate, Ashley said, brushing back her hair. By the way, is your wedding cancelled? The tone of those words froze Melissa. A small smile played on Ashley's lips. You knew? Melissa asked. Ashley shrugged petulantly. Mom and Dad were saying you should put family first. But why? Ashley's eyes sharpened for a moment, and her voice lowered. What a shame your wedding got cancelled. Looking at her sister's smiling face, Melissa understood everything. This accident was Ashley's performance. And her parents had either been fooled or were complicit. Melissa left without a word. In the hallway, she called Jason with trembling hands. As soon as she heard his voice, tears welled up. The wedding, we have to cancel it. What? Jason's voice was shocked. Why? Melissa explained everything. Jason's voice gradually turned to anger. Why are you giving in? What about our relationship? I know. But. Melissa was at a loss for words. You've made your choice. Your family, Jason's voice was cold. I won't be jerked around again. The call ended. Melissa leaned against the hallway wall and cried silently. That night, she called all the guests herself and contacted vendors to cancel. The next morning, Melissa decided to leave Seattle. Sunlight streamed into Melissa's apartment on the 14th floor of a Chicago high-rise, with a view of Lake Michigan. Melissa was already awake before the alarm went off. Her sleep patterns had changed since that day a year ago. Meeting with the New York client at 10, she said, checking her schedule on a tablet with coffee in hand. In the year since leaving Seattle, Melissa had established her own interior design firm, a design studio, with unexpected success. Her innovative designs featured in architectural magazines had created buzz, and now she was receiving work requests not only from Chicago but also from New York and Boston. Free from the weight of family, Melissa was able to fully express her talent. Taking a deep breath, she stood by the window. Life in Chicago was busy but fulfilling. She had made new friends, and there had been possibilities for romance at times, but memories of Jason still lingered in a corner of her heart. The past is the past, she recited like a mantra as she showered and prepared for work. When she arrived at the studio, her assistant Rachel greeted her in a flustered state. Melissa, you have visitors. They've been waiting for about 10 minutes. I don't have any appointments scheduled, Melissa frowned. Well? Rachel hesitated. They say they're your parents. Melissa froze. For a year, she had cut off all contact with her family. She had changed her phone number, blocked email addresses, and created new social media accounts. How had they found her? Where are they? Rachel pointed toward the conference room. Melissa took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions. She was a different person now. Not that obedient Watson daughter anymore. When she opened the conference room door, Frank and Doris were sitting there. Both looked noticeably aged. Especially Frank, whose back had become hunched and whose face was deeply lined. Melissa, Doris stood up and tried to approach her daughter but stopped when she saw Melissa's cold gaze. How did you find me? Melissa's voice was ice cold. Frank cleared his throat. We hired a detective. Wasn't cheap. What do you want? Melissa crossed her arms, remaining near the door. Won't you sit down? Frank asked. His voice was weak and pleading, no longer the commanding tone of the past. Melissa hesitated but sat at the edge of the table, keeping as much distance as possible from her parents. Talk, she said. Doris looked at her husband. Frank lowered his eyes and moved his lips as if searching for words. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. Watson Interiors had been stably managed for years. What happened? She asked. Everything started going wrong after you left, Frank shook his head. Your design sense and customer relations were actually the store's lifeline. I've been gone a year. Why now? Doris spoke up. We were proud. And we thought you'd come back. Melissa laughed coldly. Really? After you ruined my life? About your wedding. Frank stumbled over his words. It was a mistake. Too late now, Melissa started to stand up. It's all in the past. Wait. Doris cried out. That's not all. Melissa sat back down. Ashley is in trouble, Frank continued. She's developed maternal neurosis. She can't take care of Noah. And how is that my problem? She's receiving counseling, but someone needs to look after Noah right now. Doris's eyes were filled with tears. We're stretched to the limit with the business problems. Melissa looked at her parents in disbelief. So you want me to come home, help with the company, and take care of Ashley's child too? Frank and Doris didn't answer, but their silence meant affirmation. Why should I help? Melissa's voice trembled. After you ruined my life? Nothing's worked right since you left, Frank finally admitted. The family, the business, everything. Doris squeezed her husband's hand. You were always our rock, Melissa. Without you, we fall apart. Melissa stood up and looked out the window. The Chicago skyline symbolized her new life. You're asking me to sacrifice my life again? She turned around. Never again. Please, Melissa, Doris pleaded tearfully. Just for a few months. Until the company gets back on track and Ashley recovers. Aunt Ashley? Melissa raised an eyebrow. What did she say about me? Frank and Doris exchanged glances. She doesn't know, Frank admitted. That we're here. Wonderful, Melissa said sarcastically. Nothing has changed. Things have changed, Frank stood up and approached Melissa. I've changed. What I said to you that day was the biggest mistake of my life. Wait a minute, Melissa held up her hand. You didn't come here to apologize but to ask for help, right? Her parents fell silent. That's what I thought, Melissa sighed. You still take it for granted that I'll sacrifice everything for the family. That's not true, Doris said weakly. Really? Melissa tried to maintain her composure. You destroyed my marriage. And you never once apologized for it. Now the company is in crisis, and Ashley is having problems, so suddenly you need me? Frank bowed his head. Get out, Melissa's voice was soft but firm. Melissa, please, Doris stood up and tried to approach her daughter. Get out now, Melissa said in a shaking voice. My lawyer will contact you this afternoon. I'll consider what can be done for the company. But I'm not coming back. What about Noah? Frank asked. Melissa momentarily pictured the face of her 4-year-old nephew. He had done nothing wrong. I'll think about it, she said finally. Goodbye. After her parents left the studio, Melissa collapsed into a chair. The past came rushing back all at once. What had happened on her wedding day with Jason? How her life had changed. And now her family needed her. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. Jack, it's Melissa. I need to go to Seattle. Can you adjust my schedule for the next few days starting tomorrow? She closed her eyes. She hadn't decided to return home. She just needed to see for herself. As Melissa stepped off the plane in Seattle, she was hit by a complex mix of nostalgia and anxiety. After renting a car, she headed to a hotel near her former home, memories flooding back as she drove. After checking into the hotel, Melissa took a deep breath and drove to Watson Interiors. She parked in front of the store and stared at the building for a while. The store's appearance had changed during her year of absence. The once elegant atmosphere was gone, and the window display featured outdated furniture covered in dust. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Melissa whispered quietly as she entered the store. The formerly bright atmosphere had disappeared, replaced by silence and stagnation. A few customers were listlessly browsing merchandise, with none of the previous vitality. Melissa. Martha, who had worked at the store for many years, called out in surprise from behind the counter. She came around and embraced Melissa tightly. You've come back. Temporarily, Melissa smiled in response. I'm just here to see the situation. Martha looked around and said in a low voice, Your father is in the office. But things are not good. I know. As Melissa walked through the store, she examined each piece of furniture and display. Her eyes detected various problems: outdated product lines, inappropriate pricing, poor use of space. There were mountains of issues to address. When she knocked on the office door, Frank's tired voice responded. Inside, he was buried in piles of paperwork. Frank stood up in surprise when he saw his daughter. Melissa, you really came. Yes, Melissa replied calmly. Show me the company's situation. Frank wordlessly pulled out ledgers and financial documents. Melissa was shocked by the numbers. The situation was worse than she had imagined. Sales had plummeted, debt had ballooned, and at this rate, the business wouldn't last 3 months. How did it come to this? Frank sank deeply into his chair and said wearily, After you left, customers began to leave. And I couldn't keep up with the times. For the first time, Melissa saw fragility in her father. The man who had always been strong and stubborn now appeared defeated and aged. What about online strategy? We tried, Frank gave a bitter smile. But you know what they say about teaching old dogs new tricks. Melissa opened a computer and checked the company website. It was poorly made, as if by an amateur, with unappealing product photos. I understand, Melissa stood up. First, I want to see Ashley. Frank looked surprised. Really? Yes. I need to understand everything. On the way to Ashley's apartment, Melissa pondered what to say. Should she explode with anger or handle it calmly? In the end, she decided to focus on understanding the whole situation rather than giving in to emotions. At the apartment, Doris was playing with her grandson Noah. Seeing Melissa, Noah shyly hid behind his grandmother. He's grown so much, Melissa smiled. Melissa. Doris exclaimed with a mixture of surprise and joy. Ashley is in the bedroom. She's not feeling. I understand, Melissa replied quietly. When she knocked on the bedroom door, a faint "come in" was heard. Entering the room, Melissa found Ashley lying in bed. She was thinner than before and looked unwell. Her eyes widened when she saw Melissa. Melissa. Her voice was thin. It's been a while, Melissa sat down in a chair. Let's talk. Ashley tried to sit up but quickly gave up. About what? Why did you do it? Melissa asked quietly. On my wedding day? There was a long silence. Ashley stared out the window and finally spoke. I was jealous because you were always perfect, her voice trembled slightly. You were Dad's pride, Mom's accomplished daughter, the store's talented designer. I was always in your shadow. That's not true, Melissa shook her head. It is. Ashley's voice strengthened. I was always asked, why can't you be more like Melissa? And I couldn't bear to see you in a happy marriage right after mine had fallen apart. Melissa was speechless. She hadn't understood the depth of her sister's feelings. Still, you had no right to ruin my life. Ashley began to cry. I know. I've regretted it since that day. But I didn't have the courage to apologize. And now. She gestured to indicate her condition. I'm like this. What happened? After the divorce, I became depressed. Taking care of Noah, work, everything became overwhelming. Ashley wiped her tears with a handkerchief. And Mom and Dad were busy with company problems, so I was alone. Suddenly, she looked directly into Melissa's eyes. I really need help. It shocks even me to admit it. Melissa took Ashley's hand. The anger was still there, but she could understand her sister's suffering. I'll help, Melissa said with determination. But there are conditions. Ashley looked at her with a mixture of hope and anxiety. First, I want a sincere apology. And you must continue counseling. I'll help with Noah and the company, but you all need to make an effort too. Ashley nodded quietly. I'm sorry. I apologize from the bottom of my heart for ruining your life. The sisters stared at each other in a long silence. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a beginning. That night, Melissa worked on a business plan in her hotel room. Saving Watson Interiors would require radical reforms, building an online strategy, refreshing the product line, redesigning the store. With her Chicago experience and connections, there was potential. The next morning, Melissa gathered her parents and Ashley at the store to explain her plan. I'll rebuild this place while maintaining my business in Chicago. But I have some conditions. The family listened intently. First, transfer part of the management rights to me. Second, don't interfere with my design policies. And most importantly, we need to build a new relationship as a family. We can't go back to how things were. Frank looked dissatisfied but quickly nodded. Understood. I accept your conditions. That evening, Melissa walked alone through the city. She went to the park where she had once walked with her fiancé Jason and sat on a bench. I lost him that day because of my own fault, she whispered quietly. If she had stood up more strongly, if she hadn't given in to her family, her life might be different now. But now she was walking a different path. Melissa looked up at the sky. She had decided to save her family, but that didn't mean returning to her old self. As a woman with new boundaries who knew her own worth, she would rebuild family relationships. 6 months later, Watson Interiors was bustling with a reopening celebration party. The store had been transformed into a bright, open space where traditional furniture and modern design were beautifully integrated. Not only local customers but also architects and designers from Melissa's network were attending. "It's wonderful," a local real estate agent exclaimed admiringly. "I never thought Watson Interiors would make such a comeback." Melissa smiled with a glass in hand. "Thank you. I believe it's important to respect tradition while adapting to the new era." Shifting her gaze, she saw Frank deeply engaged in conversation with a young customer. Previously, he would have dismissed a young person's opinion, but now he was listening earnestly. Change hadn't been easy for him, but he was making his own effort to overcome the company's crisis. Doris was playing with Noah using a miniature house. Her expression was bright as she enjoyed her role as a grandmother, the previous anxiety gone. Melissa. Turning around, she saw Ashley standing there. She had cut her hair short and regained a healthy glow. Through 3 weekly counseling sessions and working part-time handling the store's accounting, she was gradually regaining her confidence. "Is next week good for the new catalog photo shoot?" "Yes, that's fine," Melissa answered. The sisters' relationship was gradually being repaired, but it wasn't the unconditional trust of before, rather, a new relationship based on mutual respect. While helping take care of Noah, Melissa had clearly established boundaries. The center of her life was firmly herself. Toward the end of the party, Melissa stepped out to the back of the store alone. Life commuting between Seattle and Chicago was busy, but there was a sense of fulfillment in walking her own path. Her relationship with her parents had changed too. She was no longer bound by the role of the good daughter, but was beginning to build an equal adult relationship. "Melissa?" She turned around in surprise at the familiar voice. There stood Jason, her former fiancé. "Jason. Congratulations on the renewal." "It's excellent work," he smiled. "I saw it in an architecture magazine and felt I had to come see it." Melissa couldn't hide her agitation. "Thank you. But why?" "I'm handling a new project in Seattle now," Jason explained, standing at a distance. "And I wanted to know how you were doing." They gazed at each other in silence. 1.5 years ago, their lives had taken separate paths. "You look happy," Jason said quietly. "Yes, I suppose I am," Melissa answered honestly. "And you?" "Me too," he nodded. "Actually, I'm engaged. To a woman I met at an architectural firm." While feeling a small pain in her chest, Melissa said sincerely, "Congratulations, Jason." "Your decision wasn't wrong," Jason said with a serious look. "I couldn't understand it then, but I do now. You were connected to this place, this family. I should have respected that." "I was wrong too," Melissa admitted. "I sacrificed too much for my family. But it's different now. From what I can see, everything seems to be going well." "You could say that," Melissa smiled. "Family relationships have been repaired, but they're different. It's an equal relationship now." After reminiscing for a while, they said goodbye. After Jason left, Melissa took a deep breath. The pain of the past wasn't completely healed, but she was moving forward. Back at the store, Ashley was looking for her. "Melissa, I want to tell you something." Ashley's expression was serious. "Thank you. If you hadn't come back, we would have fallen apart. Especially me." She stumbled over her words. "I'm truly sorry. About your wedding, everything." Melissa placed her hand on Ashley's shoulder. "That's in the past now. What's important is how we live from here on." Inside the store, Frank had begun a speech. To mark the beginning of a new chapter for Watson Interiors, I'd like to introduce the person who deserves the most credit, my daughter, Melissa. Melissa stood beside her father. He put his arm around her shoulder and continued, looking slightly embarrassed. Without her, either this store nor our family would be here. Thank you, Melissa. As applause erupted, Melissa savored the moment. Her life had taken an unexpected direction, but now she had no regrets about her choices. Her relationship with her family had been repaired, but it was a different, equal relationship than before. And most importantly, she herself had changed. No longer just the good daughter who made sacrifices, but a woman who knew her own worth and had the strength to set boundaries. Melissa smiled and raised her glass. To new beginnings.